Welcome to CareHero Podcast, where our mission is to educate, motivate, and inspire nurses and other healthcare professionals. In each episode, we explore how our guests successfully advance their careers and improve the lives of their patients and residents. We share practical tips and success stories to illustrate how you, our care heroes, can grow in your own personal and professional lives.
Welcome, Care Heroes. We're your hosts, Martin Hoy.
And I am Gerard Hernandez.
We've got a fantastic guest for y'all today.
Yes, indeed, Martin, we do. We have Christy Davis from the Tip Top Anesthesia Group.
That's right. Christy's a CRNA, a CEO, and a supermom. She's got some great information and tips to share for everybody, including how traveling abroad can lead to finding your passion, how seeing a gap in the market and finding a way to fill it can lead to an amazing new business venture, and the importance of networking and staying on top of your game.
All right, let's do this, Martin. Great, and here for today's show, we have Christy Davis, who owns and operates Tip Top Anesthesia Group. She's a CRNA and is the Chief Executive Officer. So, Christy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Christy, we always start with this. All of our care heroes, including yourself, are superheroes. But if you had to choose one superpower, what would that be and why?
Well, this is a tough one, but I think my superpower would be that I'm invisible. I hear and see everything just because I manage a lot of people and a lot of centers. So everything seems to get back to me, either good or bad. So I think that is also a strength of mine, but could also be a weakness at the same time.
Christy, we're going to dive into your story here, but can you tell our audience what is a CRNA?
Of course. So a CRNA is a Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist. We are advanced practice nurses. We all have a master's in anesthesia, but currently the entry to practice is a doctorate, and all new classes graduating moving forward need to have a doctorate in order to practice. California is an opt-out state, which means we practice independently with no supervision. So we carry our own malpractice, and we have no supervision in the state.
Oh, that's great. And that's why, obviously, we'll segue into your business and how you ended up starting your own company. But even before that, can we go into how did you get into healthcare?
So when I was in school, back in high school, I just wanted to help people. So I either wanted to be a teacher or a nurse, with the end result being able to travel. And when I looked around, the people in my life that were teachers, they seem to get hired and then they stay with one school or employment for their adult life. And I always had a zest for adventure and I just wanted to travel. And I thought if I could become a nurse and travel to different countries, that would take care of my motivation to travel and see the world, but also help people.
That's great. I know that your passion to be a health leader began on a trip. I believe that was in Guatemala. Could you tell us about that?
Yes. So in order to graduate with my bachelor's degree in nursing, I took a travel assignment, an elective in my last year where we set up primary healthcare clinics in Guatemala. And that was eye-opening. I'll never forget it. It was in 1995, and it was my first time internationally traveling. And it was just exciting. And people from all over the different villages would travel 16, 20 hours to just see a physician. And we just really opened up these clinics and tried to help people as much as possible with primary health care. And the organization that I was with was affiliated with the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And they had an ongoing relationship with this one community in Guatemala called Comatencio. And every year they would go back, which is important because a lot of organizations will just go into these villages and they'll leave and no one will see them again. So they really established rapport with community leaders in the area and delivered over and over throughout the years.
And was this program through the university as when you were an undergrad, or was this postgraduate?
No, this is an undergrad.
This trip to Guatemala, it was before you completed your bachelor's of nursing.
That is correct. It was a senior elective.
So you went out, so you got your Bachelor of Nursing, right, from the University of Alberta, fellow Canadians. Mm-hmm. That's great. And then you spent 10 years as a bedside ICU nurse in Canada, New Mexico, and California. Yes. So what was your light bulb moment that you're like, hey, I want to pursue a nurse anesthesia degree now?
I was an ICU nurse for 10 years, and then I was ready for a change. And that change included perhaps starting a family. I wasn't sure at that time, but all I knew was hospital work. And the hospital schedule was a bit grueling. You usually do 3 to 4 12-hour consecutive shifts every other weekend. And it was fine when I was newly married and also in my 20s. But when you start thinking about a family, I wanted control of my hours and I needed the flexibility. And I thought, what should I pursue? I've already been a nurse for 10 years. Should I become a nurse practitioner? Should I get an MBA? I just didn't know what to pursue. And one day when I was at UCLA in the ICU, I met a fellow travel nurse, and she actually was in a nurse anesthesia program out east, and she was telling me all about it. And I thought, oh, that seems really interesting. And in Canada, we don't have nurse anesthetists at all. And so it was very foreign to me. I started doing my research, and I thought, I really enjoy the clinical aspect of my job. I loved looking after ICU patients. I loved starting IVs. I loved just being on the front line. So I looked into nurse anesthesia programs, and that's where it all started.
Can I ask you, when you were considering nurse anesthesia versus being a nurse practitioner or doing your MBA, so what kind of factors led you to choose the nurse anesthesia program?
So I had worked with many nurse practitioners in the hospitals, and they tend to stay in the acute care setting. Not all of them. I'm certainly not a nurse practitioner, but the ones I worked with were all hospital-based. And I just thought, if I'm going to stay in a hospital, I really like the clinical aspect of being with the patients, starting IVs, moving in that direction versus running a clinic and seeing a volume of patients. So I was more leaning towards the clinical side.
It sounds like you loved what you did and wanted to continue working bedside.
Yeah, I love bedside nursing.
And so could you tell us a little bit about your Master's of Science in Anesthesiology that you completed, I believe, at the University of Southern California?
Yes. So interestingly enough, when I graduated, there were only 3 programs in California. There was Samuel Merritt up north, USC, and then Kaiser has a program as well. And that was in 2004. Now, I'm happy to say we have over 6 to 8 programs in the state. And our specialty is just growing leaps and bounds, which is very exciting.
That's great. Could you tell us a little bit about Tip Top Anesthesia Group? How did that start?
So once I graduated from USC, I took a staff position at Harbor UCLA, and I was a CRNA as a new grad for just over a year. And then my husband and I, we decided to start our family, and I was pregnant. And same as the hospital shifts go, I was working 12-hour shifts, AM, PM, weekends. And then all of a sudden, a baby comes along. And I took my 6 months of time off to enjoy the baby. And my daughter, she was just so little and so fragile at the time to leave and work a 12-hour shift, and you're breastfeeding and all these other things. It just killed me. And so I thought there has to be a better way to live my life and still have the balance that I needed to be a mom, to be a wife, to be a CRNA. And I started asking around about private practice. And this was in 2008 at the height of the housing recession, and people were losing jobs. And a lot of people in healthcare were going back to organizations. They were going back into hospitals just for the security. And all of a sudden, there was this gap in private practice for providers. People were still having their outpatient surgery, but they didn't have any providers in the community. And whatever providers there was a shortage. And so a few calls came in, and I just started working for a couple of plastic surgeons in the area. And I loved it. I would go out, I would do a breast dog in 2 hours, and then I'd be home with my baby. So I thought, this is magical. I loved it. And from there, it just snowballed into more work.
Sounds like you found the perfect role for you in your life stage and where you were in your career.
Absolutely. That's how it all started.
And I love that you, going through this, you reached out to your network to get ideas. And eventually that's how you identified this need and started small and eventually grew your company to what it is today. So I think that's inspiring because, as mentioned to you before, I have a newborn. So now understanding that life does change, right? When you have a newborn, and finding something that you can work around your schedule. This is terrific. And now look where you're at today. So with Tip Top Anesthesia Group, how big is your team now?
So our team, we've grown tremendously over the past 10 years. And so I've recruited some amazing people that have been with me since the beginning, and I'm continuing to grow. But I have about 20 full-time staff, independent contractors consisting of both CRNAs and anesthesiologists, and we service 27 surgery centers and 2 hospitals in the LA area.
And when you started Tip Top Anesthesia Group, was it just you or did you have any partners in this venture?
It was just me, just myself. And then when I became pregnant with my son, I didn't want to lose all the work I had just for myself. And so I thought I need to bring someone on to help me so that we don't lose what I've created.
That's really impressive. I mean, how did you go about starting this by yourself? Did you lean on any contacts you had? Did you find any resources in the community? Could you tell us about that initial phase of your career at Tip Top?
We have a professional organization, and it's the California Association of Nurse Anesthetists. So I had some friends that were on the board there and very active at the state level. And I just started to network. I would go to these CANA meetings, and people eventually find out who's in private practice, who's not. And when needs arise, you just start making the phone calls and the network becomes narrow and you meet people.
So it sounds like you created the opportunity by putting yourself out there and connecting with friends that were in CANA and continuing to grow your Rolodex.
Yes. And I continue to do that today. I'm very active at the state level. I'm always at the events. I network with politicians. I'm out in the world just to basically be at the forefront of the community. And whenever different needs come up, at least I know they're out there, or even opportunities, so that there continues to be work for my team.
And I want to kind of drill into that just a little bit more, because I would think that not all of our listeners are naturally inclined to network and be as what seems to be extroverted as you are. Do you have any tips for those nurses that are thinking about doing something like this, that networking isn't their natural forte?
Sure. So I haven't always been an extrovert. I suppose just being in business, I'm forced to be out there and make these connections and talk to different facilities and talk to surgeons. But I would like to drill home that the personality isn't so important than the skill. To be a CRNA, you have to be at the top of your game. You have to have the best skills. And we're going up against MD anesthesia groups, and we're not being supervised. So we don't have the opportunity to fail. We have to always function at the top of our game. We can never disappoint, and we can never let patients or our surgeons down at any time.
Good words to live by.
And so, Chrissy, you are competing against MDs. So how do you foster that culture with your team, understanding that, you always have to be at the top of your game? Because, the MDs are trying to challenge hey, maybe the CRNA's group is not as good as us because we're a group of doctors.
Right. And I go up against this every day. And it's something I'm very proud of, actually, because I do have anesthesiologists that are affiliated with Tip Top. There's work for everyone. If you want to work, there's work. Everyone has a mortgage. Everyone has a car payment. So if you're willing and ready to work, there's work out there for you. The issue with MD anesthesia groups is they tend to cherry pick cases, and they're usually solo providers. Not always. I mean, I am generalizing, but our anesthesia group, we take in everything. Our skills are top notch. We never say no. We care for peds patients all the way to the elderly. And we just are there for the patient. It's not about cherry picking any cases or what are we going to get paid? What are reimbursements? We just kind of tackle the patient as a whole, take everything in, and then whatever we get, we get.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Christy, so what does a typical day look like for you?
Chaotic. Usually I can bounce between 3 to 4 places in one day. I'm checking in on different surgery centers. Sometimes I'm checking on different CRNAs, and often I'm running my own room as well and running a business.
So you're still sort of working bedside as well as running this business?
Absolutely. And that's what I love to do. I love to give anesthesia. I love being in the OR. I love the energy. I love taking care of the patient. And then I would say that on the admin side, I've worked myself into getting an MBA just because it's forced me to do all the administrative duties that I wasn't used to doing.
Oh, that's great. When did you complete your MBA, or are you completing it now?
No, it's a self-taught MBA, just running this business.
I got it. I completed MBA in Toronto 6 years ago, and I have no doubt that the 12 years you've had surpassed anything that I learned in a year and a half.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's been fun. It hasn't always been easy, but at the end of the day, I'm having fun.
So building this business, especially when you started as a new mom, like you said, there's a lot of work out there. What if there's somebody out there who wants to, start their own practice as CRNA? What tips would you have to someone who's starting today, assuming they already have the credentials? I know you have a doctorate. That's the requirement now. Given what you've done, what advice would you have for that person?
The biggest advice I would offer is it's important as a new grad to get your skills in at least a hospital where you have the support, where you have a team helping you hone your skills. Because once you enter private practice, often you're the only provider in these facilities, and you really have to have the skill set to manage any emergency.
Yeah, putting out fires. Of course, have the team to support you, maybe Tip Top Anesthesia Group to pick up some skills, right?
Absolutely.
So, Christy, you've been a CRNA for many years and now as a business owner. I'm sure you've had many inspiring moments, but could you just describe one?
Sure. 2 stand out. One when I was a SRNA, a student, and then one as a full-fledged practicing CRNA. Do you want me to talk about both?
Sure.
Okay, so when you're in anesthesia school, the first 6 months are didactic, where you're just in the books, learning, taking exams, and that sort of thing. And then after 6 months, it's your first day of clinical, and you start to get back into the clinical setting and entering the OR. So it was my first day of clinical rotation at one of our hospitals. And I go into the pre-op area and I interview my patient, and I was like, "Oh, hi, I'm Christy Davis. I'm your SRNA, and I'm going to give your anesthesia today." And he's like, "Oh, okay, Christy, how many of these have you done?" And I said, "None." And he goes, "Oh, it's your first day?" And I said, "Yes. And in fact, you're my very first patient." And I thought he was just going to run, because often you do have patients who say, "I do not want a student. I don't want any resident. I don't want anyone to deal with me except the main person." And I'll never forget this to this day. And I often think about him often. He said to me, "Well, don't worry about it. I believe in you, and we'll get through this day together." And we did. And it was really an amazing moment to start my career.
After all these years, that's such a great story and something that you'll remember for the rest of your life.
It is. He was awesome. And I have students today, and I'm always hopeful that they can have the same energy and excitement about our profession.
And what about your story as a CRNA, full-fledged?
Well, full-fledged, it's also being a business owner. But recently, in fact, in the last couple of weeks, a surgeon stopped me just out of the blue and said, "Christy, I just want to talk to you for a minute." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I'm thinking the worst. What did we do? What haven't we done? And he just said, "I've been a surgeon for 40 years, and I've worked in many hospitals, and I've worked in many settings and with many anesthesia groups. But your group, every single one of you, it's the best group I've ever seen in 20 plus years. Keep up the good work.
Christy, that's such a great thing that doctor said to you, and I'm glad that you're getting feedback like that.
Yes. And in fact, what's nice about it is we don't often get feedback. We're there to deliver a service and get the job done. So it was nice to just hear that, mainly for my team and my group of CRNAs and anesthesiologists, because I like to think we're all interchangeable, and we are. We all can just show up and deliver and keep the patient safe.
As a follow-up to that, I actually had the pleasure, of course, of meeting your staff, and they're wonderful. They're an extension of you. How have you fostered that culture, given that everybody is in different surgery centers, hospitals, they're everywhere, all over the place. So how have you fostered that culture within your organization?
We take care of each other. Bottom line, we're more of a family. Life happens. And so I tend to cater to everyone's needs, whatever's going on in their life. For instance, somebody just recently got married, so they went on their honeymoon. Go enjoy yourself, enjoy your time, come back refreshed. Someone just had a baby, they need shorter hours, or someone just has a new puppy and it's like having a new baby, really, and they need to be home early to take care of things. And especially now in this COVID era, we're all homeschooling. And so we're all trying to bounce schedules around, and there's AM cohorts, PM cohorts. I have 2 in the PM cohort, so I'm trying to rush home. And Dan, who's been with me from the beginning, he has kids, and we're just trying to bounce things off. Ala, who you met, she's a big surfer. As long as she gets to surf once a week, we're good. We just try to take care of each other.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not surprised to hear that positive feedback from a surgeon, because clearly it's from the top down. You instilled this amazing family culture to your group, and it's really inspiring to see and hear about.
Thank you. I'm very proud of my group and my team.
So we're talking about the business and how to grow. And I think one thing that you've had to do is to connect with surgical centers and hospitals, and you've had to build these relationships. Could you just tell us a little bit about what you think the best way is to work and communicate with facility management?
Well, you have to be always present and in real time. So if someone has an anesthesia request and it comes through, you have to respond within seconds. You just always have to be available, and you always have to service your contracts like it's your family. Surgery is a stressful time. Patients need to book and make arrangements ahead of time. And often it takes a whole team to make that happen, especially when they're coming into a surgery center. It doesn't happen overnight. So they need to know that all aspects of their care are taken care of.
What is the best piece of advice that you have received?
To always be present and available. It seems pretty basic and simple, but really, those are just words I live by, just to always be available to those that need you.
For sure. And actually being present and listening, because a lot of times people are there, but they're not listening.
Very true.
So Christy, how are you managing your personal and professional life right now during this global pandemic? I know you talked a little bit about that, managing your kids' school schedules, but could you go into that a little bit more?
Basically, we're just trying to be outside more. The pandemic, in many ways, has had an upside. It was able to have a reset button, both personally and professionally. I'm able to spend more time at home with the kids. We try to do an outdoor activity at least once a day, either going for a walk or going for a bike ride and just enjoying each other. We did get a dog, a 70-pound bull pitty. Roxy's her name, so we're enjoying her. She's lovely, and taking it day by day.
That's great. I have a dog as well, and I don't know how my mental health would be without her. I think there's been a lot of studies out there that show that having an animal like a dog or a cat really do help with one's mental health, and especially during the pandemic. So I totally get it.
My dog, Roxy, who's 2 years old, we rescued her. She was 1 day away from euthanization. So she's just lovely.
That's such a sweet story. Thank you for doing that.
Okay, so say you get to travel to the future. What does the future of nursing in the CRNA field look like?
Well, I think we're just going to grow, and there's always going to be a need for more surgeries. Right now, there's just such a shortage of OR time, even for elective surgery. So the more ORs you can open up to help patients, that requires providers. And whether it's an anesthesiologist or a nurse anesthetist, we need to take care of patients. It's not a war. It's working collaboratively and getting these patients taken care of.
Absolutely.
So, Christy, do you have any final thoughts or advice?
Well, I just would like to do a shout out to my team. I'm only here today because of them. I'm only one person, and it's because of them that we've grown and we've managed to secure all of our work. And it's a passion. So I'm just happy to be part of the team.
That was a great episode, Gerard. And now it's time for the handover.
Okay, folks, here are our top takeaways from this episode. Travel and explore the world. You might just find your passion and calling in life. If you see a gap in the market that you think could fill, don't be scared. Learn and find a way to go for it. Surround yourself with a supportive team that can help you build your skills and further your career. Try to make a consistent effort to network and be on top of your game. And lastly, be kind. Give compliments to people, especially when they really deserve it. You never know how much that one small act of kindness can positively impact a person.
Awesome handover. And I'll always remember that last point, Gerard, and how Christy's first patient really shaped her career as a CRNA. We also want to thank our Care Heroes for listening, and don't forget to rate our podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you want a shout out on a future episode, just visit CareHeroPodcast.com. Go to the Contact Us page and submit your name, role, and location for a shout out on a future episode.
That's right, Martin. Now it's time for some shout outs.
We want to give a shout out to Christian, registered nurse from Los Angeles, Angel, certified nursing assistant from New York City, and Imtizal, research assistant from Toronto, Canada.
And all right, that's it, folks. We'll be back soon. Same Care Hero time, same Care Hero channel.
Thanks for listening to CareHero Podcast. Don't miss out on future content. Hit subscribe and rate us in your favorite podcast app. Also, remember to visit us at careheropodcast.com to send us your feedback, sign up for the newsletter, and nominate a Care Hero to be interviewed on a future episode.